Joining me live is Israel Defence Forces spokesperson Major Doron Spielman. Thanks for your time. I guess just starting on this hostage story, obviously the situation in which they were taken was horrific and described being beaten initially, but after that, seemingly pretty well cared for. Were you surprised? Does it give you hope for other hostages being held, including given medical attention and medicine as well?
So I think that we have to be very careful not to extol the virtues of Hamas. Hamas is a murderous, deadly, evil organization. In taking these people, they shot children, they beheaded children, they raped women. We even have firsthand accounts now that they raped dead women and were told to do so. They grabbed an 85-year-old grandmother, dragged her across the border, and her husband, along with 222 hostages, are still in captivity. Anything Hamas is doing, they're doing for themselves or as a propaganda film for the entire world. We saw the videos of them handing out cookies to the hostages, but we know the real videos, the same videos they took 18 days ago as they were massacring civilians. So I think it's saying that they took good care of the hostages is really not the main focus. The main focus is that Hamas needs to immediately, unconditionally return the
Mm.
222 hostages, including a 9-month-old baby that they have currently under their custody.
Well, yeah, the question actually went to, starting off with how bad the circumstances which they were taken, but whether it gave you hope around other hostages being held. On that prospect, on whether they'll be released, there is no ground invasion still. Is it paused right now? Because if that did happen, that would be a pretty dire likely outcome for the hostages if a full ground invasion happened now with still, 222 is the last figure I saw, hostages being held?
So, look, the situation, as you're mentioning, is incredibly, incredibly difficult. On one hand, we have Israeli hostages that we're committed to bringing home. The chief of staff, the prime minister of the state of Israel, and everyone in Israel is just waiting for these people to come home, and we're celebrating when they come home. At the same time, we're strongly moving forward right now with our operational objectives. The last 24 hours were probably the most definitive 24 hours in terms of Israeli strikes on Hamas targets in the Gaza Strip. We managed to eliminate 5 of their top commanders, people who were directly involved in the attack in Israel, hit hundreds of targets that were strategic Hamas targets, so that when this ground invasion, if and when it takes place, and as you know, we're planned and ready for it to take place, when these soldiers go into those incredibly difficult positions, knocking out a command tower, a sniper tower, a trap that's just sitting there and waiting, as I heard one of your other one of the feeds that you rolled here say, is critical to our troops. So every day that goes on for us is actually an advantage in this situation. So I hope we can do both: bring the hostages home and definitely carry out our strategic goals of eliminating Hamas.
Right. You said if and when the ground invasion goes ahead, so it's not necessarily going to happen. What will that depend on?
So from the very beginning, we've said that we have our ground forces that are being trained and that are ready to go, naval forces, our air forces, and everything will be dependent on how our commanders, heading down from the political echelon onto the military chief of staff, how they decide to conduct this war. It's going to be conducted on our terms, our time frame. The where and when will be our choosing, but we're ready for all the options. And how those come to
Hmm.
play will be how to best bring down Hamas with as minimal civilian casualties as possible.
The hostages, many of them being held in tunnels, would destroying Hamas's capability, does that now centre on those tunnels? Are they such a key part of it that they need to be destroyed? And does that make this situation again even trickier around the hostages?
I think definitely it does make it trickier. Hamas has been planning for this for years. They have more than 500 miles, according to some reports, of underground tunnels, meaning an entire city below the entire Gaza Strip, full of arms, manufacturing of weapons, hostages, Gazan civilians. It's an entire web that is very, very difficult. And Hamas has, again, been planning for this. Instead of spending their resources on building more power plants for the people of Gaza or hospitals or schools, They created an underground web, which I don't think any major country in the world can even say that they even have in a metro system. So it's going to be very, very difficult. And this is what our troops are training for, including the aerial strikes that we're doing. Every day that goes by, we're training more and more to perfect our maneuvers when that time comes to battle Hamas in those underground layers that they have just simply been creating for that purpose.
The bombing campaign so far from Israel, you alluded to it being successful in terms of targeting some of those top commanders, in particular in the last 24 hours. They've also obviously killed Palestinian civilians. The Gaza-run health ministry says 5,700, 2,300 of them children. Now, I don't know what the real numbers are, but clearly they're quite high, whatever they are. Has that given the IDF any pause for thought on this method, whether it's extracting too high a civilian toll?
So, first of all, our war is with Hamas and not with the people of Gaza. When Hamas charged over our border and took captive our people and slaughtered innocent Israelis, they also at the same time knew they must have weighed that obviously any country in the world would respond. And obviously, the potential threat to their own civilians was not only something to turn them off from doing this, it was probably something that also is an advantage for them because they know they can commit acts of terror and bait us back into Gaza and hide behind civilians. And so that whenever we try to eliminate Hamas, they put civilians in the way. And when civilians are killed, Hamas
Okay.
waves them almost as like a human rights flag. So we're used to this game. I mourn the death of any civilian, but at the end of the day, we've warned all the civilians: go from the north to the south, move out of the way of war. We've warned it now for 10
I know
days.
you've got to go in a moment, Major. If I could just ask a quick follow-on up, though, and I know
Yep.
you've said that, and even that Hamas keeps civilians behind anyway. But again, does that give you pause for thought because you know those civilians are there in a lot of, or at least some of these targeted bombings?
It is not only pause for thought for the IDF, it is directing many of our actions, meaning we are so carefully, I can't tell you the
Okay.
number of targets we're not striking because there are civilians in that area. But again, the question really needs to go to Hamas. Why are they putting these civilians there?
Okay. I know you've got to go. We appreciate your time today, Major Doran Spielman. Thank you.